The crash site had been closed. No survivors. No hope. But when an old retired K9 suddenly barked furiously at a photo, everything changed. Why would a trained dog react like that to just a picture? What they uncovered next in the frozen forest will make your heart stop. Drop a comment. Do you believe animals sense what we can't? And don't forget, subscribe for more true miracle stories that the world almost forgot. The town of Red Hollow, Montana, had just emerged from a brutal cold snap. A curtain of mist still hugged the evergreen trees, and snow, mottled and hard-packed, lay in patches beneath the pine needles. Winter hadn't fully let go, though the calendar insisted it was April. The morning air was crisp, dry, and heavy with the scent of sap and ash. For the townspeople, the headlines from just a week ago still lingered in their thoughts like frost on window panes. Flight 287. No survivors confirmed. Inside the Red Hollow Sheriff's Office, the mood was still subdued. The incident had rattled even the most stoic among them. The recovery teams had done their job. The black boxes were en route to Washington, and the site was being cleared for long-term analysis. In the break room, Clay Morgan stood motionless, a thick manila folder clenched in his weathered hands. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, Clay had a square jaw, graying at the edges with lines etched deep from both sun and sorrow. His eyes were a tired, clouded blue, the kind that had seen too much and trusted too little. His sheriff's jacket still bore dust from his last field shift, and his right wrist carried a thin scar, the remnants of a K9 operation gone wrong years ago. Once a respected field leader for K9 operations, Clay now held a quieter post. A bitter divorce had cost him his house, his marriage, and nearly his sanity. He was still battling in court for shared custody of his 6-year-old daughter, Hannah, whose laughter he hadn't heard in weeks. As Clay flipped through the crash site investigation report, Duke, his retired K9 partner, lay curled beside his boots. Duke was a German shepherd, now 11 years old, with a grizzled black and tan coat and cloudy amber eyes that still sparked with discipline and intelligence. His hind legs were stiff. Hip dysplasia had set in, but his ears still perked up at the sound of the zipper or the rustle of danger. Retired for 2 years, Duke was no longer government property, but to Clay, he was still the only partner that had never betrayed him. Clay hadn't intended to open the file again. It was evidence from closed case. The National Transportation Safety Board had ruled pilot error due to weather and mechanical failure. No survivors. End of report. But something about the photographs inside unsettled him. Passenger documentation, recovered from the flight manifest, had been arranged in orderly printouts, photos of the crew, travelers, even one blurry image of a child clutching a worn teddy bear. He set the folder on the table and stepped away to pour a cup of coffee. Then it happened. Duke, silent for the past hour, suddenly rose to his feet with a low growl, ears alert, tail rigid. His nose hovered above the printouts. Then he barked, once, then again, with rising intensity. A deep, full-throated alarm bark, the kind trained for threats for narcotics or bombs. Not paper. Never paper. Clay turned, hot coffee spilling onto his wrist. Duke, hey, what is it, boy? The dog's front paw slammed down onto the photograph of a young woman. Her face was delicate, framed by light red curls. The tag beside the photo read, Row, Madison, Seat 11C. Clay knelt, puzzled. She was one of the confirmed casualties. Why would you be stopped? Duke had never been trained to recognize images. He had no reason to react to a photo, especially one without a scent. The door creaked open. Sarah Jennings, the station's forensic liaison, stepped in. A tall, lean woman in her 40s, Sarah had pale skin, angular features, and eyes sharp like ice. She wore her dark hair in a tight bun and had the walk of someone used to being right. Once a rising FBI analyst, she'd moved to Red Hollow 5 years ago after the death of her husband in a bombing in D.C., a tragedy that had dulled her warmth but sharpened her sense for inconsistencies. You all right in here? She asked. Clay gestured to the dog. He just started going off. Look at this. He pointed to the barked-on photo. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's strange. Dogs don't usually react to still images. I know, Clay muttered. That's why it doesn't make sense. She glanced down. That's Madison Rowe, flight attendant. She was reported as deceased by day 2. No body recovered, but the wreckage was consistent with no survivors. No se intrigue. No movement. Just this photo, Clay said almost to himself. Duke whined, pacing in a tight circle, tail still stiff. Sarah frowned. Clay, don't start spiraling. You're already on thin ice with the custody hearing. You go rogue on this, and your ex will spin it as a breakdown. Clay nodded slowly, but his mind wasn't on courtrooms. What if she wasn't on the plane when it hit? Sarah folded her arms. You're suggesting she was alive post-impact? That's reaching. Duke doesn't bark at shadows, Clay said firmly. He never has. There was a pause. Then Sarah sighed. If you reopen this, you're on your own. But if you find something, anything, bring it to me first before you call in the cavalry. Clay nodded again. Understood. Later that night, back at his modest cabin, just outside town, Clay sat on the porch with Duke at his side. The stars above Red Hollow were clear, sharp, and cold. Wind whispered through the trees. He thumbed through the custody documents in one hand and held Madison's photo in the other. He made a choice then, not loud, not brave, but honest. He whispered, We're going back out there, partner. Duke lifted his head. The sun hadn't yet crested the jagged ridgelines of Red Hollow when Clay Morgan shifted his truck in a park along an unmarked service trail. The forest here, dense, dark, untouched since the crash, loomed with tall pine trunks and a silence that pressed him like weight. This area was well beyond the official search perimeter, where even forestry crews hadn't dared to step. Duke sat in the passenger seat, his gaze locked on the tree line, posture alert. The fog that laced the ground shifted like ghosts across the earth. Clay opened the glove box, pulled out a battered topographic map, and spread it across the hood. The original search zone was marked in red. He had memorized it. But Duke's reaction yesterday wasn't pointing them back there. The direction the dog had barked, eyes trained on Madison Rowe's photo, suggested a trail opposite the map site. He slid a leather collar around Duke's neck, clipped a long lead just in case, though he doubted he'd need it. Let's see what you saw, old boy, Clay muttered. They set off in silence, boots crunching over frozen moss and brittle pine cones. The forest narrowed around them quickly, like jaws. The deeper they went, the more the air changed, colder, stiller, and laced with the metallic scent of damp soil and something else, burnt wood. By mid-morning, Duke stopped. He stood motionless, nose lifted. Then, without waiting for command, he veered sharply left, dragging Clay with him toward a narrow game trail lined with broken branches and something unusual. Fabric. It was barely visible, torn and tangled in thorns. Faded navy blue polyester. Clay knelt, part of a flight attendant's uniform. Jesus, he whispered. Then came a noise, distant, metallic, irregular. A voice over a radio. He turned quickly, hand on his holster, when two figures appeared behind a veil of trees. They weren't wearing sheriff gear. Special Agent Nolan Hart stepped forward, a compact man in his early 40s, clean-shaven with salt and pepper hair, slicked back too perfectly for forest work. His sharp gray eyes missed nothing. Sheriff Morgan, he said flatly, though Clay had long since stepped down from that title. Taking a scenic detour. Behind him was Agent Beth Carr, taller, dark-skinned, wearing field fatigues with her name tag visible. She was younger, early 30s, with an athletic frame and a distant look in her eyes like someone doing math no one else could see. She didn't greet Clay, only watched Duke with a mix of caution and curiosity. You're trespassing on federal property, Hart continued, gesturing to the trees like he owned them. There's still classified debris out here. We're finalizing a sweep before reopening to forestry. I'm not interfering, Clay replied, tucking the fabric into a zip pouch. Just walking my dog. Hart stepped closer. With tactical gear, maps, and an K9 unit who suddenly reacts to a dead woman's photograph. Coincidence, Clay said stone-faced. Beth finally spoke, her voice calm, distant. Coincidences don't usually come with service collars and evidence bags. Before Clay could answer, His phone buzzed in his chest pocket. He hesitated, checked the screen. Melissa, missed call X2. Then a text. Hannah's fever won't break. She's asking for you. Please. If you care, come. His heart kicked sideways. He looked up. Hart watched him closely. Something important? Clay pocketed the phone. Personal. Hart nodded toward Duke. We've already logged everything recoverable. Whatever you're hoping to find out here, it's over. Don't make this into something else. Clay nodded once, but said nothing. He turned and walked away, Duke padding beside him. The agents didn't follow, but Clay knew they were watching. The threat was unspoken, but clear. By noon, the sky had clouded and the temperature dropped. Clay stopped by a fallen log to rest. Duke sniffed along a ridge ahead. Clay took out his phone again, rereading the message. Hannah, his daughter. Sick. Waiting. He could be back in under 2 hours. He stared at the path ahead, the direction Duke had been pulling him toward. Then his phone buzzed again. Melissa, voicemail received. He clicked play. Melissa's voice, trembling. She's asking for you, Clay. She keeps saying your name. If you care more about ghosts in the forest than your own daughter, just tell me now. I won't call again. His hand clenched. Then he looked up. Duke was gone. Duke, he called. No answer. He dropped his phone, grabbed his flashlight, and sprinted forward. After 50 yards, he found the dog, frozen in place, hackles raised. Duke stood at the edge of a shallow ravine. Down below, half covered by brush, was something unmistakably human, a booted leg, partially exposed. Clay dropped to one knee. The foot wore a flight crew shoe. The sock was stained with old blood. But that wasn't what made Clay's breath catch. Next to the body was a second boot. Smaller, red, child-sized. He scanned the scene. No movement, no heat, no sounds. Just one question echoing louder than the wind. Why was a child's shoe here, when no children were reported missing from Flight 287? The ravine was steep and shaded, a hollow carved by centuries of wind and thaw. Clay Morgan crouched low, brushing aside pine needles and twigs until he uncovered what Duke had sensed, a body weathered by the cold, face obscured by decay. The uniform suggested flight crew, a female based on the frame. Nearby, half buried in soil, sat a nylon backpack with scorched edges but intact zippers. Clay hesitated for just a second, then pulled on a glove and unzipped it. Inside, among spare batteries, a tattered notepad, and protein bars turned rock hard, lay a Canon DSLR camera, dusty but otherwise untouched. He pulled it free, turned it in his hands, and found the battery pack had fused from heat, but the SD card slot was intact. Bingo, he muttered. He glanced over at Duke, who stood watch at the ridge, tail still. Rather than linger, Clay placed the card into a waterproof pouch, zipped the pack closed, and moved up the slope, brushing fresh snow from a jacket. The light was dimming. It wasn't safe to stay here much longer, especially not with what he had just recovered. By the time Clay made it back to his truck, it was nearly dusk. He didn't drive home. Not yet. He headed 2 towns south to Silver Creek, a quieter place with fewer prying eyes, and pulled into the driveway of a small, cedar-planked bungalow. The porch light flicked on as he approached, and the door creaked open before he could knock. Elias Becker stepped into view. A lean, wiry man in his late 60s, Elias had weathered skin darkened by decades under desert and jungle sun, and a neatly cropped silver beard. He wore loose flannel and jeans with thick boots, and a pair of round glasses perched on his nose. Elias had once been one of the FBI's top digital forensic specialists, but after losing his son to an overdose 6 years ago, he had vanished from field work. "You look like hell, Clay," Elias said, gesturing him inside. "Coffee's fresh." Inside, the house was warm, cluttered with old radios, screens, and circuit boards. A German Shepherd figurine rested beside a worn photo of a young man in uniform, Elias's late son, Jeremy. Clay pulled the SD card from the pouch and handed it over. Found it near a body off route from the main crash site. This thing might hold something unexpected. Elias turned it in his hand like a gem. Camera model? Canon DSLR, pro level. Bag had journalistic markings. Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting. We had a missing freelance reporter, Amelia Strand. on the radar a few months back. She was investigating child trafficking rings. Word was she booked a last-minute flight from the East Coast. Flight 287. No confirmation she boarded. Clay's expression stiffened. There was something else. He pulled out his phone and displayed a still photo he had managed to extract using his own tools before the battery had died. The image showed a group of passengers near the back of a plane, casual, smiling. Off to the side, holding a small stuffed rabbit, stood a little girl, around 5 years old, pale blonde hair braided messily, with a pink bracelet on her wrist. Zoomed in, the embroidery read, Maggie. Clay said quietly, "She's not on the manifest." No child passengers were logged on Flight 287. Elias studied the image, then leaned back, the room suddenly quiet. "That bracelet," he said. "My granddaughter wears one like it. Handmade, Etsy stuff. Not commercial. You think she was trafficked?" "I think someone didn't want her name in any system," Elias replied, already booting up his secure laptop. "And if Amelia Strand was on that flight, she may have been onto something bigger than just a story." Outside, snow started to fall, light but persistent. While Elias worked to extract the hidden data from the SD card, Clay stood by the window, phone in hand. Messages from Melissa blinked on the screen, unread. He finally opened one. "Hannah's fever broke. She's asking if you'll be home tonight. Just let me know." Clay typed a reply, but stopped before sending. Not yet. Not while this trail was burning hot. An hour later, Elias called him over. "Clay, you need to see this." The video was grainy but clear. Shot handheld, presumably by Amelia. A few clips showed interviews in airports. But one, time-stamped the night before the crash, caught Clay's breath. The camera was aimed through a window into what looked like a hangar. Inside were several men loading unmarked crates onto a small aircraft. Among them, blurred but visible, was Madison Rowe, the same woman from the photo Duke barked at. She was speaking to someone out of frame, and then pointed toward a child being ushered into the rear of the aircraft. "Maggie," Clay whispered. A second later, the camera panned briefly to a badge clipped to a guard's vest. It bore the seal of a private security firm, one Clay recognized from old FBI cases. Helix Horizons, once suspected of laundering transport for illegal human movement, but never formally charged. Elias paused the video. If this went down, and someone found out Amelia was filming, the crash wasn't an accident, Clay finished. It was a cover-up. Elias leaned forward. "You realize what this means? If even one of these kids survived and is still out there, we have to find her," Clay said firmly. "Maggie." Duke barked softly at the door, as if echoing the urgency in the room. The storm rolled in quietly just after midnight, wrapping the treetops in a constant murmur of wind and branches. The forest around Clay's parked truck swayed like a living thing, its whispers rising and falling through the pines in rhythmic pulses. The headlights had long since died, leaving the woods blanketed in fog and shadows. Clay had planned to sleep in the cab for a few hours before heading back out, but when he woke to find Duke gone, the urgency in his chest snapped him upright. His flashlight cut through the thick mist, sweeping across tire tracks and melting snow. "Duke!" he shouted, voice echoing across the tree line. No response, just wind. The dog's leash was still coiled on the passenger seat. Clay cursed, threw on his jacket, and stepped into the cold. His boots sank into the softened ground. He knew Duke's age and injuries limited how far he could go, but instinct was a powerful thing. The shepherd was likely trailing a scent, something fresh, something important. A mile into the woods, the trail split. Clay spotted paw prints, distinct and sure, pressing into the damp soil between patches of moss. He followed them, weaving through thick brush until he stumbled upon a rusted fence, its wires tangled with dead vines. Beyond it sat a derelict campground, long abandoned, collapsed cabins, empty fire pits, and rusted swings creaking in the wind. Clay pushed through a bent gate, his flashlight flickering as batteries drained. He stepped into what used to be the mess hall. The roof had partially caved in, but the floor remained dry. As he passed an overturned cot, something caught his eye, a child's blanket, cartoonish and pink, tucked beside a broken crate. Dusty but recently used. He crouched beside it and noticed crumbs, small and fresh. Someone had been here. He raised his flashlight and scanned the corners. On one of the walls, carved with a shaky hand into the wood panel, were the words, "Help Maggie." Below it, a crumpled paper was pinned by a rusted nail. Clay unpinned it carefully. The paper was torn notebook stock, the writing scrawled in faded pencil. Childlike but desperate. "Please find us. She's still alive. They think we're all dead. We're not. Hey." Suddenly, a twig snapped outside. Clay moved to the broken window, pulling out his sidearm. "Who's there?" No answer. Then a low growl. Relief flooded him as Duke emerged from the fog, fur bristled, eyes alert. "Where the hell did you go?" Clay asked, lowering the gun. But Duke didn't approach. He turned and trotted deeper into the trees, looking back once. Clay followed. The trail led them past the camp's edge and up a ridge. Halfway up, the ringing of his phone made Clay freeze. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Clay Morgan." The voice was deep, clipped mail. "Who's asking?" "This is Graham Teller. I'm your daughter's legal counsel, Melissa's side. I called twice already. Your custody hearing is at 10 a.m. sharp tomorrow. If you don't show, the judge signs permanent placement." Clay stopped walking. His chest tightened. "I'm out of town." "You're aware, Mr. Morgan, that failure to appear, again, makes you look unstable." "This isn't about that," Clay snapped. "I'm in the middle of something bigger." "Bigger than your daughter?" Clay's jaw tensed. "You wouldn't understand." There was silence. Then the line went dead. Clay stared at the phone. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then Duke barked once, sharp and alert. Clay tucked the phone away and ran up the last of the ridge. At the top, nestled behind a line of cedar trees, was a stone bunker in trance, old, moss-covered, and partially hidden. Its metal door hung ajar. Clay stepped inside, light flickering across concrete walls, half-collapsed shelves, and a mattress piled with rags. At the center of the room lay a plastic bracelet, embroidered with pink thread. "Maggie." Clay knelt, breath shallow. The bracelet was dusty, but the imprint of a wrist still lingered in its curve. Then came the sound again, a child's cough, muffled but unmistakable beyond the far wall. Clay rose slowly, gun at the ready, as Duke stepped beside him. Behind a sheet of warped plywood was a trapdoor, slightly ajar. He opened it. The scent of earth and sweat wafted up. A ladder led down into darkness. "Stay close," Clay whispered. The trapdoor groaned as Clay pried it open with the butt of his flashlight. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below, heavy with mildew, soil, and something faintly metallic. He hesitated only a second, then descended the ladder, each rung slick with condensation. Duke followed, agile despite his age, landing beside Clay in a crouch when they reached the bottom. The space beneath was small, no more than a converted storm shelter. The walls were unfinished concrete, cracked and moss-ridden. A single dim lantern flickered in the corner, casting a soft golden glow over the cramped room. Blankets were piled on a mattress made of bundled rags. And there, curled against the far wall, was a child. She was tiny, no more than 5 years old, with pale skin and tangled golden hair matted at the sides. Her cheeks were sunken, and she clutched a dirty stuffed rabbit in one hand like a lifeline. Around her wrist was the unmistakable pink-threaded bracelet that read Maggie. Clay dropped to one knee, voice gentle. "Hey there, I'm Clay. You're safe now." Maggie didn't respond. She looked at Duke instead. The dog sat slowly, tongue slightly out, eyes soft, posture non-threatening. After a moment, the girl inched toward him and reached out to touch his fur. "That's Duke," Clay whispered. "He's the reason I found you." Still silent. Maggie nodded once, small, hesitant. Clay scanned the room. On a nearby shelf sat empty food cans, a jug of water nearly gone, and a radio with broken wiring. Someone had hidden her down here. Someone had been taking care of her. Until they didn't. "Is there anyone else with you?" he asked softly. Maggie looked toward the steps, then back at him. The man in the coat left. Clay's stomach tightened. "What kind of coat?" She wrapped her arms around her knees. "He wore clothes like soldiers. But he wasn't nice." Clay leaned in. Did he hurt you? She shook her head. He said I had to stay quiet. Said there were bad people looking for us. But he didn't come back. Clay took out his radio. The battery light blinked weak. He toggled to the emergency channel and pressed the button. This is Clay Morgan. I've located a survivor from Flight 287. Child. Alive. Requesting immediate medical extraction and protection detail. The radio hissed, then silence. Then came a voice, clear, clipped. Morgan, this is Special Agent Beth Carr. Stand by. Clay exhaled. Help was coming. Minutes passed. Maggie fell asleep curled beside Duke, the dog breathing slow and warm next to her. Clay stood over them, arms crossed, heart racing but steady. Then came a rustle at the top of the hatch. A flashlight beam hit the ceiling. Coming down, Carr called. Her boots hit the ground a moment later. She was in field gear again, no makeup, ponytail tucked under her tactical cap, dark eyes assessing the scene with practiced precision. Behind her followed Agent Kyle Monroe, mid-30s, square-jaw tall, a little too neat. He moved like a man used to command but not open dialogue. Carr saw the girl and froze. Her voice dropped. Jesus, she's real. Clay nodded. She wasn't on the manifest. She says someone in uniform smuggled her off the plane before the crash. Monroe stepped closer. That's a hell of an accusation. She's 5, Clay snapped. She's not spinning theories. Monroe narrowed his eyes. And you're not exactly in a position to play hero here. You left your jurisdiction, violated search protocols, disregarded orders. You were under scrutiny before this started. Before Clay could answer, Maggie stirred. Her voice was groggy. Don't take the dog. Everyone froze. Carr knelt beside her. Sweetheart, you're safe now. We're here to help. Maggie looked at her, then pointed at Clay. He didn't find me. The dog did. He came in the dark when I was crying. No one else believed me. Monroe stared at her, eyes flicking from Clay to Duke. Then he turned away, speaking low into his calms. Get a helo ready for extraction. We've got a minor, female, confirmed Flight 287, requires medical evac and psychological support. Clay leaned into Carr. You believe her, don't you? Carr's expression hardened. I believe what doesn't make sense. And nothing about that crash ever did. As they climbed out of the bunker with Maggie wrapped in a rescue blanket, Carr pulled Clay aside. You're not off the hook, she said. But someone inside Helix Horizons is about to get very nervous. Why? Because this little girl just cracked the lie they buried 6 feet under. They reached the clearing. A low hum filled the sky as a helicopter descended over the pines. Maggie held tight to Duke's neck, and when the medics tried to separate them, she shook her head violently. Carr raised a hand. Let the dog ride. As the rotors kicked up the snow and leaves, Monroe leaned over to Clay. If this goes federal, you're going to have a target on your back. Clay met his gaze. Then I'd better stay moving. The courtroom in Helena, Montana, buzzed with quiet tension as the hearing commenced. Late morning sun filtered through high-set windows, painting streaks of amber light across the polished floor. Clay Morgan sat at the defendant's table, hands clasped, his uniform clean for once. He wore no badge today, only a plain blazer over a shirt with the collar slightly frayed, his only nod to formality. His face showed the weight of exhaustion, but something else too. Peace. Across from him sat Assistant U.S. Attorney Laura Whitaker, a woman in her late 40s with clipped brown hair and steel-rimmed glasses. Slim and immaculately dressed, she was known for her composure and reputation of being nearly impossible to rattle. She had once led cases against organized crime in Boston and wore the look of someone used to people folding under pressure. But today, she wasn't prosecuting Clay. Today, she was listening. On the witness stand, Dr. Anna Merrill, a pediatric trauma specialist from the regional hospital, adjusted her chair. A petite woman with short auburn hair and olive skin. Dr. Merrill had a gentle voice but firm presence. Her work with displaced and abused children had earned her national recognition, and her testimony today carried significant weight. Maggie is stable. She began, her tone measured. Though malnourished and showing signs of psychological trauma, she provided clear verbal confirmation that she had been removed from her parents prior to the flight. She believed she was in the custody of strangers. There is no birth record or social security number attached to her current identity. Whitaker leaned forward. In your expert opinion, would this indicate abduction? Yes, Merrill replied without hesitation. In likely part a larger operation. The judge, Harlan Davies, a wiry man with a snowy mustache and sharp voice, nodded. Let the record reflect the expert witness's assessment of Maggie's status as a trafficking victim. From the gallery, Agent Beth Carr crossed her arms and exchanged a glance with her superior. She wore her standard black field jacket, but had abandoned the tactical look. Today, she was here not as an enforcer, but as a believer. Clay's heart pounded as Judge Davies turned his gaze toward him. Mr. Morgan, he said, you were accused of obstruction, trespassing, and violating chain of command protocol. But this court acknowledges that without your illegal entry into restricted airspace and unsanctioned recovery efforts, the child known as Maggie would never have been found. Your actions were reckless, but they were right. Clay didn't speak. His throat closed around a knot of relief. Duke sat beside him on the bench. Though old and stiff, he still held his posture. Cameras had captured the dog's calm presence when Maggie was airlifted out of the woods, and the nation had quickly taken to the story. The dog who knew, headlines had read. A flurry of articles followed, think pieces, op-eds, even a children's book announcement. But the fame hadn't changed Duke. He was tired now. His breaths were heavier. His hips ached more. But he remained loyal. Outside the courthouse, Maggie sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a sky-blue blanket. A nurse named Lena, a soft-spoken black woman in her 30s with warm eyes and a scar down one cheek, kept a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maggie held the now iconic photograph, the same one Duke had barked at back in Chapter 1. It was creased and worn, edges frayed by little hands. She hadn't let it go since. As cameras flashed, she walked with Lena and Clay to the small memorial being held at a nearby park for the victims of Flight 287. A modest stone monument bore the names of those lost and a single engraved message. In the silence after, some voices still speak. Duke stood next to it, calm. Clay knelt beside him and gently adjusted the collar now embroidered with gold thread. Duke, K-9 hero, retired. Maggie approached with the photograph and bent, placing it beside the engraved base. He barked at her, she whispered to Lena, because she helped me once. She brought me a blanket before the crash. Lena smiled. She's part of your story now. As the crowd dispersed, Clay stayed behind. Maggie sat on a bench beside Duke, and Clay stepped to the side as another familiar voice approached. Melissa, Clay's ex-wife, wore a slate-gray coat and a tired expression. Her hair was longer than he remembered, and her tone lacked the usual edge. She's sleeping in the truck, Melissa said. Hannah, I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't, Clay said quietly. She needs you, she added after a pause. And after everything, maybe I was wrong. You've always been good at seeing what others miss. Clay turned toward her. Does this mean? She nodded. Joint custody. No conditions. His chest tightened, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the ache of joy. That night, back at his cabin, Clay built a fire in the hearth. Maggie slept on the couch with Hannah curled beside her. Two girls, one rescued from strangers, the other from silence. Duke lay by the fire. Clay sat next to him, one hand stroking the old dog's back. The room was still. Outside, snow began to fall. When morning came, Duke didn't rise. He lay as he had the night before, but his chest no longer moved. Life doesn't always speak in loud voices. Sometimes it whispers through unlikely heroes, an old dog, a forgotten photo, or a child who refused to be silenced. This story reminds us that love, loyalty, and faith can still light the way, even when the world tries to cover the truth. If this touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave a comment below and tell us. Have you ever felt guided by something bigger than yourself? Type amen in the comments if you believe every lost soul deserves to be found. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of hope, courage, and faith. May God bless you and your loved ones, always.